The carving knife sliced through the roasted turkey with a precision Dad always insisted upon. He was a man who valued order, tradition, and the appearance of familial bliss, even if the reality in our home was a constant, low-grade hum of disapproval directed primarily at me. Another Thanksgiving, another performance. I sat across from him at the polished mahogany table, the same table where I'd endured countless meals punctuated by subtle slights and not-so-subtle comparisons. David sat beside me, oblivious as ever, spooning mashed potatoes onto his plate with the single-minded focus of someone who never had to fight for his place at the table, literally or figuratively. Mother, my mother, flitted between the kitchen and the dining room, a nervous energy radiating from her, a silent apology for the atmosphere she rarely challenged. The conversation meandered through the usual channels. David's latest, vaguely defined venture that everyone seemed to applaud with unwarranted enthusiasm, the weather, the neighbors. Then, the inevitable pivot. Dad cleared his throat, the sound commanding attention. "Sarah," he began, his voice laced with that familiar tone. Not anger, exactly, but a condescending disappointment that was far more effective at making me feel small. "It's good you could make it. Though I must say, driving all this way for just a few hours." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. I live 2 states away now, having moved from my job years ago, a move he'd barely acknowledged save for a comment about how it was a bit excessive. "It's Thanksgiving, Dad," I said, keeping my voice even. "I wanted to see you both." "Yes, well," he continued, ignoring my attempt at warmth. "David was saying just the other day about his plans for expansion. Really thinking big, that boy, taking risks. That's what it takes to get ahead." He looked at David, a proud smile creasing his face. David mumbled something about market strategy, his mouth full. "It's not like everyone's cut out for that, of course." Dad went on, turning his gaze back to me. His eyes lingered on my sensible sweater, my practical hairstyle. "Some people prefer stability, predictability." "Which is fine, Sarah. Perfectly fine. Your accounting firm, it's stable. Very stable." He said stable, like it was a euphemism for mediocre. My firm wasn't just stable, it was thriving. I had worked relentlessly to get where I was, pulling myself up by my bootstraps with no help from him. I owned my home outright, had a healthy investment portfolio, and was respected in my field. Things he knew, but conveniently forgot whenever David was in the vicinity. "David, on the other hand," Dad boomed, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. "He's got the drive, the ambition. He's going to inherit, well, when the time comes, he'll be the one to really make something of it." My fork clattered against my plate. The "it" he referred to was the family's summer cottage, a small property by a lake that held more sentimental than monetary value, but was nonetheless a long-understood point of contention. It was always assumed it would go to David. I never cared about owning it, not really. What stung was the casual dismissal of my own hard-won success, the blatant declaration that David, whose ventures had a disturbing habit of failing spectacularly, and requiring Dad's financial bailouts, was somehow more deserving of anything than I was. But he wasn't done. He leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly, as if sharing a profound truth. "Honestly, Sarah," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "David deserves better. He needs support, someone who truly understands his potential. Not everyone is built for that kind of partnership, are they?" The context wasn't even about the cottage anymore. It was broader. It was about life, opportunity, worthiness. He was saying plain as day that David deserved a better sister, a better someone in his life than me. The world tilted. The polite smiles, the clinking silverware, the smell of gravy. It all faded. All I saw was Dad's face, contorted in that expression of mild distaste he reserved for me. All I heard was the echo of those words. David deserves better. Something, inside me, something that had been carefully contained for 35 years, snapped. It wasn't a slow erosion anymore. It was a sudden, violent crack. I stood up. My chair scraped back loudly, a jarring sound in the otherwise quiet room. All eyes turned to me. Mother looked startled. David looked mildly annoyed at the interruption. And Dad looked surprised. He clearly hadn't expected a reaction. "You know what, Dad?" My voice was trembling, but not with sadness. It was a raw, unfamiliar tremor of pure rage. "You're right." He blinked, clearly confused. "David does deserve better," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "He deserves better than being constantly propped up by you. Better than being told he's somehow more important than everyone else. And you deserve exactly what you've built." I looked at Mother, her face pale with alarm. "And you, Mother, standing by letting him say things like that for years. You're complicit." Then I looked back at Dad. The surprise on his face was rapidly giving way to anger. Good. Let him be angry. It was a far more honest emotion than the patronizing disappointment he usually displayed. "I'm done," I said, the words feeling like heavy stones leaving my chest. "I'm done with the dinners. I'm done with the comparisons. I'm done with being told I'm not enough, not as good as David, not worthy of your respect. I'm done trying." I walked out of the dining room, my legs stiff. I grabbed my coat from the hall closet. Mother called my name, a weak, pleading sound. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur of tears and adrenaline. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the steering wheel tightly. But beneath the hurt, a cold, hard clarity was setting in. Done wasn't just a word I said in anger. Done was a state of being. When I got back to my house, the silence was deafening. But it was a welcome silence. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing heavily. The rage was still there, a live wire humming beneath my skin. It needed an outlet. Not destruction, but reconstruction. Reclaiming. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. Calls from Mother, then Dad, then even a few bewildered texts from David. I ignored them all. I plugged my phone into the charger and left it in the other room. I needed space to think, to plan. The next morning, the cold clarity remained. "Madam, first thing I did was tackle the shared finances. Years ago, in a misguided attempt to foster family connection, or perhaps just because Dad asked, I had added myself as an authorized user on several of their credit cards. Utility accounts, a department store card Mother used heavily, even an old gas station card. It was a small thing, meant to help them build credit or simplify bills. It had turned into them occasionally asking me to cover things or using the cards for small purchases they'd forget to pay me back for. Nothing. Huge but symbolic of a blurred boundary I needed to redefine. I called the credit card companies, one by one. I need to remove myself as an authorized user. The process was surprisingly simple. A few questions, account numbers, verification of identity. By lunchtime, I was off their cards. I logged into my own online banking portal and transferred a significant sum from my checking account into a separate, rarely used savings account, just in case. I also checked the status of a small investment account I'd set up years ago in David's name, contributing a small amount each month, hoping to give him a safety net he seemed incapable of building himself. I transferred the full balance, including my contributions and accrued interest, into one of my own accounts. It felt harsh, but necessary. He deserved better? Let's see how he does when he's truly on his own. Next was the car. 3 years ago, David had needed a new car for one of his ventures. He couldn't get approved for a loan on his own, of course. Dad had asked if I would co-sign. I had been hesitant, but Dad had been insistent, talking about family helping family. Against my better judgment, I had agreed, with the understanding that David would make the payments. Of course, within 6 months, the payments started falling behind. Dad had stepped in to make some, and I had quietly covered the rest to avoid the loan defaulting and ruining my credit. Technically, the car was registered in David's name, but my name was on the loan. This was more complicated. I called the bank that held the car loan. I explained the situation, stating I was the co-signer covering the payments, but was not the primary driver or owner. I wanted to understand my options for getting my name off the loan or taking possession of the vehicle. The bank representative was helpful. Because I was on the loan and had been making payments, I had leverage. I could pay off the remaining balance myself and then pursue legal options to get the title transferred to my name or force David to sell it and pay me back. Or I could demand possession of the vehicle if David was in default on the portion he was supposed to pay. I considered paying it off just to be done with it. But that felt like throwing good money after bad, essentially buying David a car. No. This was about reclaiming what was mine, asserting control. I chose the more direct route. I contacted a lawyer specializing in property and debt disputes. She advised me on my rights as a co-signer and the steps I could take to legally repossess the car if David was in default. A stern letter from my lawyer to David and Robert outlining the situation and demanding either immediate payment of the outstanding balance, including the payments I had made, or the surrender of the vehicle, arrived at their house a few days later. The phone calls intensified. Robert was furious. "How dare you, Sarah? Sending a lawyer! This is family!" "Family doesn't tell you you're not good enough, Robert," I said, my voice steady this time, consciously using his first name to create distance. "Family doesn't use you and expect you to clean up their messes." "That car is for David's business," he spluttered. "David's business is David's responsibility," I replied. "Just like this loan is currently mine because you pressured me into it. Either you pay the outstanding balance or I'm taking the car." He raged, he pleaded, he tried to guilt-trip me. It was all noise. I held firm. Within a week, a tow truck, dispatched by my lawyer's office, arrived at their house and took the car. I paid the outstanding loan balance. It was a significant sum, but worth every penny for the clean break. My lawyer sent them a final letter stating that the matter was considered resolved from my end regarding the vehicle and the loan. While the car situation was unfolding, I took the most symbolic step. The lock's on my house. My home was my sanctuary. No one else had a key, but I wanted a physical manifestation of the new boundary I was setting. I called a locksmith. "I want all the exterior locks changed," I told him. "Deadbolts, doorknobs, everything." He came the next day. The process was quick, efficient. As the old lock mechanisms were removed and the new, gleaming ones installed, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. This house was mine. My space. And now, it was literally impenetrable to the people who had made me feel so exposed and vulnerable for so long. Changing the locks felt like sealing the deal. I blocked Robert's number, Eleanor's number, and David's number on my phone. I unfriended and blocked them on all social media platforms. I set up filters on my email to send anything from their addresses directly to trash. I wanted no contact, no possibility of them slipping back in. The initial aftermath was a strange mix of relief and a quiet sadness. Relief that the constant pressure was gone. Sadness for the family I never truly had but had always longed for. There were no dramatic confrontations on my doorstep, thankfully. My guess was the combination of the lawyer's letter about the car and the sudden radio silence on all fronts made them realize, on some level, that this was different. This wasn't a temporary sulk. It was a permanent departure. Life settled into a new rhythm. A rhythm without the anxiety of upcoming family gatherings, without the need to brace myself for criticism, without the quiet resentment of feeling like a perpetual disappointment. My work thrived. I focused on my friendships, cultivated new hobbies. I started therapy, processing years of emotional baggage I hadn't realized I was carrying. Months turned into a year, then 18 months. I heard snippets through distant relatives, carefully neutral updates about their health, their activities. Nothing about finances. I assumed they were managing. Perhaps the shock of my actions had forced them to become more self-sufficient. I allowed myself a brief flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this forced independence had been good for David. Then, the emails started. Not directly to my inbox, but showing up in the trash folder my email filter directed them to. I initially ignored them, but curiosity, or perhaps a lingering morbid fascination, got the better of me one afternoon. I opened one. It was from Eleanor. It was rambling, full of passive-aggressive language about how I had abandoned them, how worried they were, how much they missed me. No apology for the past, of course, just a thinly veiled attempt to elicit guilt. I deleted it. More emails followed, from both Robert and Eleanor. They became more direct, filled with flowery language about wanting to mend fences, about how life was hard without their family around them. Still no acknowledgement of what had happened. No apology for the dinner, for the years of belittling. Then came the one that made me freeze. The subject line was simply urgent. It was from Robert. It detailed a series of unforeseen circumstances. David's latest venture had failed spectacularly, leaving him with significant debt. Robert had tried to bail him out again, but this time, something had gone wrong. Maybe it was a bad investment, maybe a poorly timed market downturn, maybe just the cumulative effect of years of financial mismanagement. Whatever it was, they were in trouble. Serious trouble. The house was mortgaged to the hilt, their savings were depleted, and Robert's retirement fund had taken a major hit. And then came the ask, couched in language about family pulling together, about how they needed my help during this difficult time. They needed a substantial loan. Enough to cover David's debts and keep them afloat. The audacity took my breath away. They wanted the daughter they had consistently belittled, the one they had told was less deserving than her brother, the one they had driven away with their toxicity, to rescue them from the consequences of their own actions and David's failures. I sat at my desk, staring at the email. The rage I had felt that Thanksgiving night resurfaced, hot and potent. But it was different this time. It wasn't just pain and anger. It was also a chilling sense of satisfaction. This was it. This was the karma they had inadvertently invited. They had invested everything, their time, their energy, their financial resources, their emotional validation, into David, the golden child. They had treated me with disdain, pushing me away. And now, their golden child had led them to ruin, and they were turning to the one they had cast aside for salvation. They deserved better? David deserved better? No. They deserved exactly this. They deserved to face the consequences of their choices, of their favoritism, of their cruelty. I picked up my phone. I almost called my lawyer, thinking about drafting a formal refusal. But no, this needed to be personal, a direct, unambiguous response from me. I opened a new email. I typed slowly, deliberately. Subject: Urgent Robert and Eleanor, I received your email asking for financial assistance. I want to be clear. I will not be providing you with any money. Not a loan, not a gift. Nothing. You speak of unforeseen circumstances, but your current situation is a direct result of choices you have made over many years. Your consistent favoritism of David, your willingness to enable his irresponsibility, and your complete disregard for my feelings and accomplishments have led you here. You taught me a valuable lesson that Thanksgiving night. You showed me exactly where I stood in your lives, and you confirmed that my worth was negligible compared to your unwavering belief in David's supposed potential. You told me David deserved better than me. Perhaps he does. But more importantly, I deserve better than a family that treats me with such disrespect and then expects me to clean up their messes. I cut ties with you for my own survival and well-being. That hasn't changed. I am not your safety net. I am not responsible for your financial problems or David's. Do not contact me again. Do not ask for money again. Our relationship is over. Sarah, I read it over. Every word was true. It wasn't vengeful, in the sense of actively wishing harm upon them, but it was a refusal to be their savior, a refusal to pretend the past hadn't happened, a refusal to let them use me one last time. It was the ultimate act of self-preservation, delivered with the cold, hard truth they had denied for so long. I clicked send. The silence that followed was profound. No frantic calls, no pleading emails in my trash folder. They seemed to finally understand the finality. Or perhaps they were simply too consumed by their own crisis to continue the effort. Months passed. I heard nothing more. The distant relatives stopped providing updates. Perhaps they were told not to, or perhaps they simply had no good news to share. I didn't know what happened to them. I didn't know if they lost their house, if David ever managed to stand on his own 2 feet, if Robert and Eleanor ever acknowledged the part they played in their own downfall. And truthfully, I didn't need to know. My life continued to flourish. The peace I had found was deeper now, less fragile. The scars from my childhood and the years of being belittled were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had taken back control of my life, my finances, my emotional well-being. I had drawn a line in the sand, built my own fortress, and refused to let the toxicity breach the walls. The revenge wasn't in their suffering, though their predicament was a stark example of consequences. The real victory, the true karma, was in my own liberation. It was in thriving without their approval, building a life based on my own worth, and finally, definitively, refusing to be their victim any longer. I had chosen myself, and in doing so, I had won everything that truly mattered.